Good afternoon. Welcome to the January 17th City of Tullahoma Planning Regional Planning Commission meeting. At this time, I'll call this meeting to order. And determination of a quorum. We have 5 present with Almacher and Comer absent. So we do have a quorum. And I will ask everyone to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Moving on to number 4. Read and approve the minutes from the regularly scheduled Planning Commission held on December 19th, 2022. Can I have a motion? Motion from Barry, a second from Mr. Sellers. Ms. Samaniego? You
should have a revised draft in front of you. There was one correction as far as one of the public comment speakers. He felt like he was misquoted, so we corrected that for that party during the subdivision regulations review. It was Mr. Darden. Okay. So I just want to confirm that you're approving the right set.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion on that? All right. All right. With that, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. 5-0. Minutes are approved. At this time, we have the new section that was discussed on the December 19th planning meeting of general comments from the public. I'll welcome anyone from the general public to speak on any matter that is relevant and in the scope of this commission. You'll be limited to 3 minutes. If anyone would like to speak, please come forward. All right, seeing none, we will move on to reports from officers and staff. Ms. Samaniego?
Thank you, Mary Samaniego, Planning Director. Just a couple of things. We had, just for the public's information, we had our Planning Commissioner training last week for 4 hours with Sam Edwards, who's a Tennessee planner as well as a Tennessee attorney. I think that went very well. I think that he gave a lot of good instruction and stories for us to move forward with. Secondly, it was asked of me to clarify when the board renamed the planning department to the planning department from community development and how my title as planning director was created. So I've submitted those materials in your packet for review. And thirdly, I just wanted to briefly state that the Tullahoma building official, Emad Alawina, has resigned and left the city of Tullahoma. So I just wanted to say that it was a pleasure working with him since I've been here. Other than that, we can proceed with the agenda.
All right, thank you. Any additional input from the Planning Commission? All right. Seeing no old business, we'll move to new business. The first item on the new business line is the Coppers Creek Estates major subdivision plat. The applicant is requesting a continuance to the February 20th Planning Commission meeting, so we will continue that then. Moving on to item number 2, the G Road minor subdivision. Again, that will be continued to February 20th. Still waiting on a TDAC application. So we will move on past that. Item number 3, the Woods minor subdivision, a plat to create 2 lots from the existing 2.05 acres at 3882 Old Manchester Highway. Applicant Roy Woods. I would invite the applicant to come forward and speak on his item.
I'm Roy Woods. I'd like to separate this property in half. So we have two pieces of property to sell instead of one. It's already been surveyed, and there you have a plan of it there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Woods. Any questions for the commission from Mr. Woods at this time? All right. Thank you. I will move on to the public hearing. This is a public hearing. Anyone that would like to speak on the Woods Minor subdivision, come forward at this time. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the staff report. Ms. Samaniego.
Thank you. Production, can you please go to my presentation? Okay. No. I thought that was going to be a problem. Having technical difficulties, but I'll proceed. The applicant is proposing to create 2 lots. The existing property as it exists is 2.05 acres with a conventionally built house and a mobile home in the back. They're wanting to split their property front to back to put each of the 2 dwelling units on their own separate lot for potential sale. I have sent this review through the Development Advisory Committee staff. They had no objections except for some additional information that needs to be on the survey prior to signatures. With saying that, staff recommends approval of the final plat subject to all those staff comments, please.
Okay. Note the staff comments on page 15. Any
Correct.
comments for Ms. Samaniego? I'll entertain a motion. A motion from Mr. Daniel Berry.
Second.
A second from... With staff comments. A second from Mr. Hall. Any open discussion at this time? Any discussion? I guess my only comment, Mary, is that there's a 50-foot easement to the on the north, or on the, I guess that's the northeast side of the property.
Correct.
The driveway access for the back lot will be on the existing gravel driveway.
Right, it's per code requirement that they have to have a 50-foot easement for the property, but that existing gravel driveway is already in place.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'll call a vote for the Woods Minor subdivision. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 5-0. Section B, zoning map amendment. These again are public hearings. Zoning map amendment number 272, a request to rezone the property at the 1200 block of Cedar Lane from general commercial to general commercial C2 to neighborhood commercial C3 zoning. The applicant is the Horton Family Partners. I'd invite someone from the Horton family to come and speak. Please do.
Joe Lester, 2011 Country Club Drive, and I'm with Horton Realty.
Thank you, Mr. Lester.
Our plan is to do some upscale apartments, gated community. We would like to do this over time in several locations throughout the city. This is the location we've zeroed in on first, and it does require rezoning, and it is, I think, right at 2 acres, phase 1. So that's pretty much it. Any other questions for me?
Thank you.
No.
All right, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for anyone that would like to come forward and speak on the zoning map amendment. Seeing none, we'll move to the staff report. Ms. Samaniego.
Thank you, Mary Samaniego, for the record. The entire property is requesting to be rezoned, which is 17.8 acres. However, as the applicant stated, his intent would be phase 1 would start with just a 2-acre piece, but understand the entire property is to be rezoned. Further to that point, when you do a rezoning, as we learned again from our training last week, if this property is zoned to neighborhood commercial, even though the applicant has stated his intent to do townhomes, he would have the right to develop any use that's allowed in that C3 zoning district for the entire property. So keep that in mind as you're evaluating this project. It is located on Cedar Lane, which is an urban minor arterial, which is appropriate for commercial uses. Again, the property is currently zoned general commercial, so it already has zoning entitlements for commercial uses. As a side note, the city currently, through a grant with TDOT, is doing a corridor study for the entire corridor of Cedar Lane and West Side Drive. After that transportation corridor study is done, then we can start moving forward with needed infrastructure improvements and possible expansions for that roadway in the upcoming years. There are no documented environmental constraints on the property. It's currently vacant. It is in a commercial land use category, as you can see on your land use maps, located in your staff report on page 24. As I stated, the property is already zoned commercial. There are similar projects of commercial and multifamily townhome, senior living in the immediate vicinity is across from Continental Apartments. It's just to the south of NHC. So I think that with the rezoning, opening it up in the C3 zoning district to have commercial uses as well as potential for some mix of medium or high-density residential would be appropriate at this location. So saying that, staff has recommended the Planning Commission vote to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen based on the findings of fact for Section 1006E of the City of Tullahoma zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samaniego. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. Again, first from Mr. Berry and a second from Mr. Hall. Discussion on this?
What do we think? I know they're trying to get the grant deal to hopefully widen or help the flow path through Cedar Lane. Is that going to, are we going to try to make that, is that going to happen, or is that just something we're hoping for? Because, does that not impact us on how much we can pack into this area as far as travel?
Yeah, so Ms. Samaniego spoke on that. There's a TDOT grant in place right now to do a traffic study for that and evaluate the existing infrastructure. And I would assume that traffic study would take into account any future developments and what the current zoning is and stuff like that.
Yes, the current traffic study that TDOT is looking at looks at current levels of service, and they look at what entitlements have already occurred on the property. I can say that, again, per your staff report, that Cedar Lane is currently operating at a level of service C in this segment, which is an allowable amount of congestion for commercial arterial.
It's allowable?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember what the level
Yeah.
was. It was where it got to. Okay.
I don't anticipate that the development of this project would adversely impact this road to the extent that it would become a failing road.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. No, I mean, to add to Mr. Sellers' comments to my own, the only real infrastructure gap I feel like is there's sidewalks. I know that there was a project underway to do half of it from from Cedar Lane or from Highway 130 to the Air Park Road. Just speaking off the cuff, but it's only on I believe the east side of the road. So look at expanding that. But
yeah, I can say that the transportation study that TDOT is looking at, the entire corridor is from North Jackson all the way down to Clement, and they are looking at a multi-use trail on one side and a sidewalk on the other side for the entire corridor.
okay.
To touch on the sidewalk project, I don't think BOMA has said this enough. That project is in progress, and it will, I believe, go from where that trail head is through, I forget the name of that little road where the triangle is.
I think it's William Northern.
William Northern.
With the
connected
wishbone?
to Jackson. And that is in progress. You can't see it, but it's already triggered, it's already funded, it's already happening. So anytime I hear someone talking about that project, I want to make sure people know that it's...
It is just half though, right? It's not.
It's just that right side. Yeah, it's just that section.
East side.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
But no-
both sides would be better.
Another 2
but-
years, you should start, those projects are T-Dot, so it takes minimum 5 years. You don't see anything until about the third, fourth year.
Scott, Mr. City Engineer, would you like to add anything to that, or?
So we have designed, we've gone through the NEPA process on that sidewalk section from the trailhead where it ends there near the church. We've cleared the environmental, we're coordinating now with the consultant that's reviewing that corridor study there. We had initially laid in 5-foot sidewalks, now we're looking at the 10-foot multimodal there, and then of course it will go up to William Northern, it will progress along William Northern to North Jackson, and tie in down further south from there. So that project is underway.
All right, thank you. You were quiet over there. I forgot you were sitting there. I should have asked you to start with.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion?
I think it's good you're starting with a small area. Hopefully, maybe the corridor will get expanded before we get to that point that it's full, so that's a good thing.
Right. I hope it works out.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be my only comment, is this is exciting. This is the type of stuff that we are looking for and need, so thank you.
No, I concur. All right. All right, call a vote to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the zoning map amendment 272 request. The motion was from Barry and seconded from Hall. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. All right, that concludes new business. Move to other new business. Section 9 is Ms. Samaniego's 2022 year in review presentation. Ms. Samaniego?
Thank you. We do this every January, just a quick overview of what we've accomplished, what you've accomplished as our planning commission, and myself as staff is trying to do kind of a schedule or work plan for the upcoming year. So I provided for you in your report, and it's also online if the public's interested in reviewing it, on the City of Tullahoma website under the Planning Commission agendas. This year, we approved 6 rezoning applications, 4 variance applications, no zoning administrator appeals cases, 2 zoning ordinance subdivision regulation amendments, 29 zoning verification letters. Those are letters where someone will say, I need the planning staff to confirm in writing what my zoning district is. Usually those occur when there's some sort of real estate transaction occurring. 19 home occupation permits, 16 non-residential or commercial site plan approvals, and a total of 35 subdivision applications, creating 214 new lots. Of all the 35 subdivision applications approved, understand that only 3 of those were major subdivisions, one of which is in the urban growth boundary. So really, within the city of Tullahoma, we've had 2 major subdivisions in 2022. The remaining subdivisions were either revised plats or minor subdivisions where just 1 or 2 lots are created on the existing infrastructure. That number is down about 100 from last year. Last year, we created 314 new lots. And then lastly, additional single-family houses. So how many more houses were put into our housing stock? In 2022, we approved 46 new single-family house permits. So that is kind of where we are from last year. As far as looking ahead for 2023, this is a work program I obviously want to discuss with you, and I also discussed it with the city administrator. This upcoming year, we're looking to complete and adopt a revision of the 2011 comprehensive plan that is currently beginning to be worked on with the Comprehensive Plan Development Committee. Once they have recommendations, we will bring those recommendations to the Planning Commission and then ultimately to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for consideration. Staff will continue to administer the Eastern Gateway Grant along South Anderson Street for multimodal improvements. Continue to administer the Cedar Lane Grant for studying the corridor as we just reviewed in the last case. Discussion with Montlow with coordination for a possible greenway connection from campus to the city limits. And then the main direction for this upcoming year in 2023 is text amendments or zoning ordinances, subdivision regulation revisions. These revisions have been put on hold to allow staff time to work through the comprehensive planning process, which was a very large undertaking for such a limited staff. But now I think it's time to go ahead and start moving with some of these zoning regulation amendments. The first one is revise the sign regulation for compliance with case law. That's come down through the state, and actually I just read today that the Supreme Court actually had a ruling on the same sign ordinance to differentiate on-site and off-premise site and content. So that's interesting. So we'll look at the sign regulations. Fencing standards. Currently, the fencing standards that the city of Tullahoma has, there's only one standard for fencing of any type, and it says fences in front yards can only be 3.5 feet. Well, it's very common for me to have someone that has industrial property or commercial property that wants to put a security fencing along their front property line, and I have to tell them it can only be 3.5 feet tall. So I think it would probably be appropriate to have a different fencing standard for non-residential uses. So we can look at that. Simplification of the plan development regulations. Our plan development regulations are very complicated. I would hazard a guess that they were revised several years ago. It appears that they were maybe cut and paste from another larger jurisdiction, but they are very complicated to get through as far as me trying to explain it to the public and developers about the benefits and how plan developments work and the approval procedure. So I think it might be appropriate to kind of simplify that, where the same level of review is done, but just the explanation is clearer. Update and simplify the parking regulations. With that one briefly, typically, and it'll segue into the next one, updating and simplifying the permitted use regulations. I'm not necessarily proposing any policy changes, but it's extremely hard to administer both those sections. Ideally, how it should work is you should have a list of permitted uses for each zoning district. And each of those uses, say place of religious assembly, has a definition in your definitions section. And then place of religious assembly should be in your parking table where it says how many parking spaces are permitted or required per place of religious assembly use. So they should all tie together. So when I'm talking to someone calls me and says, I have a place of religious assembly, i.e. a church, synagogue, something like that. Can I have a residence on site for the priest to live in? So I should be able to look at the definitions, and the definitions just say place of religious assembly allows for a sanctuary, blah, 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 including but not limited to daycare, playground, house of residence for clergy, that kind of thing. And then also there should be corresponding parking standards. What we have now is you've got a list of permitted uses. I use place of religious assembly as an example. We have place of worship in some zoning districts. Then you have something, and then you have a church in other zoning districts where those are the same thing, and neither one are defined. And then the parking table appears, the uses in the parking table don't match our permitted uses. So often there'll be a use that'll come in, say, community center, and I'll go to look how many parking spaces are required, and it's not even a listed use. And then there are uses listed in the parking table that we don't have in our zoning code. So really, all three of those should be consistent. So I think it'd probably be appropriate to look at all three of those. And then the last one was to possibly complete some city-initiated rezonings to bring some of the non-conforming uses into compliance. There are quite a number of non-conforming, particularly single-family residences that are out there that the property owners have expressed a desire to either demolish the existing structures because they're too small and or kind of dilapidated to serve their family's uses and build a new house, or they want to add on to them, and because they're non-conforming, because they're either in an industrial or commercial zoning district, they can't. So I think it maybe would be appropriate to, as we're working through the comprehensive planning process, to start looking at the zoning ordinance and try to rectify some of these rezoning situations. I believe that some of these were as a result of a rezoning that occurred in '09. I've tried to talk to a lot of these property owners to come in and just apply for a rezoning. Some of them, they're in a catch-22 because the comprehensive plan has their houses in industrial or commercial land use category as well. So as you know, when we evaluate a rezoning, we look at the plan. Well, if the plan says they want this neighborhood to turn industrial, it's hard for you to recommend approval for it because you have to be consistent with the plan. So I think that that's something that we did kind of, the consultants and I did evaluate when we were going through the exercise of the 2040 plan. But I think it's important for the public to keep moving forward with that project of reevaluating the zoning map, particularly with residential properties. I'm open to any suggestions about deleting any of these items or any other items that you think that would be appropriate for staff to work on this year.
Any comments?
I think I had the question early on about how we initiate, where does it have to come from to do the rezoning of, to fix some of the non-conforming? Where does that end up coming from? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Where does this, the initiation of this rezoning come from? Does it come from us, or does it come from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, to fix some of the non-conforming issues that we've talked about before? I asked that question before. I'm still not sure.
It can come from either. It can come directly from the Planning Commission, or it can come from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. State statute allows either party, either boards to initiate a rezoning.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I have a quick question on 2022 here. The last bullet point, do you happen to know what that was compared to last year? Or I guess 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's on page 30 of your staff report, or no, 31 of your staff report.
Oh, it is.
So as an example, I think in 2018, we had approximately, I'd say, probably 75 new houses. 2019, it dropped down to about 50, 55. 2020, we had 60 new houses. 2021, we had about 45. In 2022, we've had 46.
Do you feel that that's where it should be? That's just an opinion question, I guess.
I mean, I think that it's at a steady rate.
Declining since 2018?
I wouldn't say declining. I mean, from one year to the next, we still have to consider that, in my professional opinion, we're still recovering from the COVID. There's still considerable amounts of supply chain issues. I know that's kind of cliche to say at this point, but it's still occurring, the supply chain issues. There's rising costs of construction, and there's still labor shortages. So actually, I'm pretty pleased that the numbers have stayed steady from last year.
Where they were.
Yeah, those are,
Hey, Mary. We talked about before making some, I can't remember the name of it, but the regulations that talked about you could do it under certain zonings, but you had to apply for it and you had to meet requirements to do it. So you kind of work on that as well?
The permitted uses upon review, how there aren't any specific criteria? Yeah.
But there was no criteria.
Yeah.
good catch.
Is that's in your bullet points here though, right?
No, no.
Updating and simplifying the permitted use regulations? Is that
No, that's
different?
just permitted uses. He's talking about the issue of how we have permitted uses upon review,
Oh,
which are
upon
kind of
that.
conditional uses that the planning commission can approve. But typically, those uses, you have the conditions of what the conditional use is, and our code doesn't have any
It's not
conditions.
automatic approval if it's
Yeah.
in there.
So what's
Still have to
the,
apply for it and meet certain requirements other than just the zone.
right, what's the permitted use regulations?
Just what uses are allowed in what zoning district.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if you.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's what's
Yeah.
under the C3 that we're looking
Right.
at.
So as an example, just to clarify for you, so you guys understand what's happening, if you look at all page 21 of your staff report, This has included the permitted uses for the C2 and C3 zoning districts. If you look at the bottom of page 21, you'll see it says uses permitted upon review. In C2, there are 2 uses listed, regional commercial center and schools. So a school is allowed in the C2 zoning district it's a use permitted upon review by the planning commission. So I bring that to you, to the planning commission for special consideration, saying that it was found that that the board and the planning commission, when they wrote the code, didn't feel that a school was appropriate to just be an outright permitted use. They wanted the planning commission to take a special look at it and for it to go through the public hearing process. But there's no criteria to give you added discretion for that review and approval. So what are you looking at?
Obligated to approve it. Each
Right, because then
site
it's, so then, see what I mean? So then you have a public hearing and people could bring up concerns, but as long as it meets just the standard site criteria, what's the difference? Usually, typically,
either need criteria
the schools,
or they don't.
an example would be like, they would have to show the queuing for pickup and drop-off. They would have to show a lighting plan if they were going to have a stadium to show how bright the fields would be. They would have to, amplified sound sometimes with school. Mostly it's pickup and drop-off are the conditions that you have to deal with schools.
Anything else? All right, Mary, thank you for that. I don't have anything necessarily to add. That's helpful to kind of see where we're at and where we're going.
Well, and I think that in general, I'm sorry to, we'll wrap this up, I know. But I think that it's important when you work in a jurisdiction that people, everybody agrees on what's in the code and everybody understands basically what's in the zoning ordinance and the code, subdivision regulations at a standard level. I can say that working through the 2040 plan and the Anderson Farm rezoning, there's a lot of confusion among the typical resident about what the zoning ordinance means and what the certain subsections require and what's required and what's not required and what's the difference between this, that, and the other. So I think it's appropriate to simplify or remedy the zoning codes to reflect the community. Also, there's a lot of things in the code that, well, not a lot of things, there are some things in the code that haven't been consistently administered or enforced. Well, let's go ahead and look at it. If it's something that the entire community and the board agree isn't something that at this time they're interested in doing or need for fun, let's go ahead and look at it and change the code.
Agreed. All right.
Thank you.
One more question.
I'll jump off my soapbox.
Ms. Berry has another question for you.
Yeah, do we have, and it may be complicated because there's so many different ways things could go, kind of if I'm opening a business here in Tullahoma, I know that we've got the big book, but do we have something for planning, maybe like a one-pager, planning and codes that says, step 1, you need to come to the development committee. Step 2, if you want to sign, you need to do this. Step 3.
Yes.
We do have that?
Yes, we have information like that all over our website. And then for new businesses, we have a complete new business handout.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That includes every department in the city, where you have to go, what you have to do. You go to here to get your business license, you're going to have to go to the building department to check your occupancy, to check consistency with the fire code. So yeah.
Okay.
We hand those out all the time.
And that's in that, I think we saw a folder.
It's in a folder, and as well as the information's on the City of Tullahoma website.
And people can go, if they want a hand copy, they can go to City Hall or to y'all and get them.
It's a City Hall.
Okay.
I think that's the end of that discussion. With that, the next meeting is February 20th at 4:30 in the municipal building. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. What?